Why hello there. So it has been a while since I've done one of these videos. In fact, I've only actually done one of these videos, but while I was researching D20 Modern, it occurred to me that there is an amount of content for that game which is neither too small nor too large to be summarized in a video such as this. So here in this video, I will go over every official D20 Modern book and web supplement, which were supplementary rules that were put out for free on the D20 Modern website, all of which I was actually able to obtain from an archived version of said website, and I will put a link to that in the description so you can check it out yourself. It is fun for nostalgia, but also you can check out all of the web enhancements and adventures and D20 Modern wallpaper and fiction. Yeah, Wizards of the Coast was actually ahead of the curve at one point in terms of providing their users with valuable free web-based content. But now let us begin our journey by traveling back in time to the distant year of 2002. Our story begins in November 2002 with the D20 Modern role-playing game core rulebook, a 384-page hardcover that contains the complete D20 Modern core rules for playing and running a D20 Modern game. It provides the 6 attribute-based basic classes and 12 standard advanced classes, and if you didn't watch my previous video, basic classes are ones that can be taken at level 1, whereas advanced classes have prerequisites limiting them to be taken at level 4 or higher. It also provides the Shadow Chasers, Agents of Psi, and Urban Arcana campaign models, which are like mini campaign settings, each of which provides 2 additional advanced classes. There are 19 starting occupations, 95 general feats, plus 1 specific psionic feat for the Agents of Psi campaign model and associated psionic classes. A very big and also very unevenly distributed selection of equipment, the complete Dungeons & Dragons monster rules with 56 monster entries, and many of the entries contain multiple versions, so the actual number of monsters is much higher, but this is just the easiest way to list it. And then 15 ordinaries, which are NPCs with partial basic class levels, each of which are provided in a low, mid, and high level version, so 45 overall. Then a selection of FX abilities, which are the complete magic rules from D&D with 117 spells up to level 5, which, remember, are only for 2 classes attached to a variant urban fantasy campaign model. And also the psionics rules from Dungeons & Dragons with 54 psionic powers, which, once again, are only for 2 classes attached to a variant psionic spy campaign setting. And 46 FX items, which are of course just magic items, scrolls, potions, etc., some of which are hilariously modern, such as Duct Tape of Repair and Windbreaker of Resistance. And then in the same month we got the even more modern web enhancement, a 10-page PDF which includes a new heavy weapon, the RPG-7, which I specify mainly because I just think it's funny when there's RPGs in RPGs. 2 new kinds of explosives, 9 pieces of surveillance equipment, a camouflage compact, scuba diving gear, and booby trap kit, 2 new each of motorcycles, trucks, boats, buses, and helicopters, 13 new spells, which are actually new modern themed spells, not just ones copied from D&D, such as Camera Shy, which makes the target invisible to cameras, and Sure Page, which lets you send a magical text message. And finally, rules for radiation exposure, 11 different animal venoms, and poison crafting. I was not kidding when I said these supplements actually had valuable content in them. But now on to May 2003 and Urban Arcana, the first full campaign setting for D20 Modern, a 320-page hardcover containing an expanded version of the urban fantasy setting originally introduced in the Urban Arcana campaign model. So the book obviously contains a lot of setting and lore information, but more notably introduces non-human player races, which the core rulebook seemed very confident would not be a thing. There are 10 standard Shadowkind species. Generally, these are the player races from D&D, like Baggy Pants Nipple Ring Dwarf and Gnome with a PDA, plus 9 more powerful Shadowkind. They literally just call them more powerful Shadowkind, who have level adjustments and are generally the monster races, like Well-Dressed Bugbear or Raver Drow. This book has some amazing art in it. There are 12 new advanced classes and 4 prestige classes, which is kind of what advanced classes already were, but they are different here due to having stricter prerequisites and only 5 levels versus the 10 levels of basic and advanced classes. So I guess there are 3 kinds of class in this game now. There are 6 new starting occupations, 43 new feats, well, new to this game, except Wild Talent, which was already in the core rulebook but is also here, but whatever. 59 new spells, well, once again, new as in new to this game, and some of the ones from the previous web enhancement. Also, rules for converting the psionic powers from the core rulebook into spells, because I guess they wanted more spells and not psychic powers? There are also 20 incantations, which are like spells, except that you don't need to be a spellcaster to cast them, as well as rules for making new incantations, with 23 incantation seeds. A large edition of mostly archaic but some modern weapons and armor, as well as other miscellaneous items, some of which were included in the core book web enhancement, as well as new vehicles, including bicycles. Also, a large selection of magic items and enhancements, including specific vehicular magic items, which is a kind of cool thing to see. And then, of course, a lot of information on running a game in the setting, with things like pre-made locations and 28 organizations and 7 adventures. 46 new-ish monster entries, including the Living Dumpster and other things that are not as ridiculous and therefore not as important as a living dumpster. And as stated previously, many of the monster entries have multiple specific monsters, so the actual monster count is much higher. And then a section on incorporating D&D and Urban Arcana, which for some reason goes out of its way to specify that there are no ghosts in D20 Modern. There are spirits which are functionally the same as ghosts, but they are not ghosts, which is a weird distinction to feel the need to go out of one's way to make. And for some reason, this section also contains additional rules for psionics, a new psionic advanced class, and 34 new psionic powers. And the same month also brought us the Making Urban Arcana More Prestigious web enhancement, a 9-page PDF which, unsurprisingly, adds 5 new prestige classes. And I should warn you, crashes Acrobat every time I try to open it. And that brings us to September 2003 and the D20 Menace Manual, a 224-page hardcover which contains 82 monster entries, a good portion of which are maybe not original, but at least not from D&D, although some are. There's also a selection of GM characters, which is what they call NPCs, but that's dumb, so I'm calling them NPCs. 29 ordinaries, 3 versions of each, so 87, and 28 heroic NPCs, which have full class levels and are for some reason presented in 6 groups of characters. And 18 different factions, both fictional and real-world organizations. So it is actually a book that tries to provide a wide selection of content for a wide selection of D20 Modern games instead of just being a D20 monster manual. But then in October, we got the Monsters That Time Forgot web enhancement, a 4-page PDF that provides rules for converting monsters from Alternity, which is a game published by TSR shortly before being acquired by Wizards of the Coast, to D20 Modern. And that is why I specified that the monsters may not be original, as the document does state that many were converted from Alternity. And they do use a Chupacabra as an example for the conversion process, so technically one monster. So now on to February 2004 and D20 Modern Weapons Locker, a 192-page hardcover containing 227 pistols, 127 rifles, 97 sniper rifles, 35 anti-material rifles, 99 submachine guns, 78 shotguns, 59 machine guns, and 24 grenade launchers with 14 different projectiles. No flamethrowers, no historical weapons, just 700 plus contemporary firearms, plus some real-world and in-game information about various gun-related topics. Now, if you watched my previous video, you will know that I am someone who found the selection of 17 handguns in the D20 Modern Core book to be excessive, so I find this entire book to be more or less unnecessary. Like, do you need stats for 23 different kinds of Glock? No, nobody does. But this book has them anyway. And if you are getting ready to tell me how actually it is necessary to have stats for hundreds of nearly identical firearms, I don't care, you are wrong, and this is an example of poor game design. And there was not a web enhancement for this book, maybe because all of the useful information in it would have actually fit into a web enhancement. So let's move on to August 2004 and D20 Future. A 224-page hardcover of futuristic content. Included are 12 new advanced classes, including the Xenophile, which unfortunately is not what you think. 8 campaign models, most of which have an advanced class. Well, technically the Mecha Jockey class is presented in the Mecha section, but clearly goes with the Mecha setting. 8 new starting occupations, 30 new feats, and new futuristic applications of existing skills. A big ol' selection of futuristic equipment, including 25 future vehicles, rules for genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and robotics, including 2 kinds of playable robot, both of which the book takes the hard stance that are not sentient. Then a section on space travel and hazards, including starship combat and customization with 26 base starships. A section on mecha construction, piloting, and combat with 5 sample mechs and 11 new mecha-related feats, plus aforementioned Mecha Jockey Advanced class. Rules for cybernetics, including 39 cybernetic enhancements, a system for mutations with 50 mutations and 20 drawbacks, which are mutations but bad, and a xenobiology section with 2 new hazards, 2 new templates, and lists of genre-appropriate monsters from the previous D20 Modern books, as well as 8 playable alien species, all of which are more interesting than the options provided in Starfinder. And this is another book that's just all over the damn place. They are trying to do Star Trek, Starship Troopers, Gundam, Cyberpunk, Gamma World, 2 different settings they acquired from TSR, and it's kinda like the core rulebook, but even less focused. They're just trying to hit as many targets as possible, instead of going for just 1 or 2 bullseyes. Then in September, we got not 1, but 2 web enhancements. The VRNet, a 13-page PDF covering virtual reality, including avatar creation rules and virtual combat, including 17 to 24 programs, depending on how you count them, which are like spells, but for your digital avatar. And the Cybernaut Advanced class. And then, New Heroic Aliens, a 10-page PDF containing the Psychotech template and 3 new alien species, which apparently are all from Star Frontiers and Alternity, and 2 new spaceship templates. Then on to March 2005, and a step back into the past, the D20 Past. A 96-page paperback full of excitement in any historical era from Renaissance to World War II, featuring a fairly in-depth discussion of realism versus fantasy in historical gaming, covering such things as old-timey overland travel speeds. 8 new starting occupations and historical contexts for the existing ones from the core book, historical restrictions on feats and 6 new ones, new historical applications of skills, historical equipment, including a selection of historical arms and armor, as well as 11 new sailing ships, 9 aircraft, and 17 ground vehicles. Also, new rules for sailing and ship-to-ship combat, and the Explorer Advanced class, which is just kinda stuck in this section of the book for some reason. Then there are 3 campaign models, although at this point they are also calling them settings, so Maybe it's a thing where these are settings because they are larger than campaign models, or maybe it's just inconsistent language. Age of Adventure, a swashbuckling 17th century setting, Shadow Stalkers, a dark Victorian era setting, and Pulp Heroes, the Pulp setting. Each of which provides 2 advanced classes, a prestige class, some monsters, and adventures. And finally, 28 new spells for the Shaman, which is one of the new advanced classes, such as things are new in this game. Overall, this is a book that suffers much less from the cover-everything mentality. They focus on 3 historical fiction settings and do more with them than in the previous campaign models, rather than just trying to cover every single type of story in every time period. And there wasn't really a web enhancement for D20 Past. There was a thing that they called a web enhancement, but it was just an annotated bibliography that they didn't have room for in the book and posted on the website, so I'm not going to count it as one. Which means it is on to June 2005 and D20 Apocalypse. Didn't we already have a post-apocalyptic setting in D20 Future? Yes, we did, and this is, I guess, a supplement to D20 Future, as it does state that it requires that book in addition to the core rulebook. Anyway, it is a 96-page paperback, which starts out in a kind of interesting way. There is a Choose Your Apocalypse section with 9 apocalyptic scenarios, 8 types of post-apocalyptic societies, and 3 post-apocalyptic eras. And I really wish I had more nice things to say about. Then there are 2 new advanced classes and 3 campaign settings. The term campaign model seems to no longer be used. Earth Inherited, a post-rapture setting about those left behind in the midst of a war between angels and devils, and when I say that D20 Modern should have focused on making something with specific appeal instead of trying to make everything, this is what I'm talking about. This is a good, distinctive concept, but it is just relegated to 12 pages, buried in the middle of a supplement to a supplement, where it is just one of 3 campaign settings. Oh yeah, the other 2. Atomic Sunrise and Plague World, which are honestly kind of unremarkable aside from the former being set 75 years after an atomic war, and the latter hundreds of years after an alien invasion. Although they do both provide an advanced class, and all 3 have some things for you to fight or align with. Then there are post-apocalyptic interpretations of 12 of the core occupations, 9 new feats, new skill applications including variant rules for using the craft skill to craft and repair with scavenged supplies, and new items such as scavengeable supplies and post-apocalyptic weapons and armor, including armor stats for protective sports equipment, which really should have been a thing in the core rulebook instead of, 17 handguns. Plus new rules for scavenging, including the dangers of exploring unsafe structures, as well as a new barter system, which is literally just assigning a trade unit value to items, and items in D20 Modern already have a purchase DC, so it's literally just they replaced one abstract value with another. Next, there are vehicle modification rules a la Mad Max or Car Wars, mounted combat rules, 18 new mutations, but those do require the mutation rules from D20 Future, plus 10 new monsters and environmental hazards, including expanded rules for radiation and super viruses and, the terrible things in the post-apocalyptic settings. And this is another book that doesn't seem to know where it's going or what it's doing. It starts off with this build your own apocalypse type section, but then instead of that being a well thought out section, each entry is only a few paragraphs, and the whole thing is only 7 pages. And then it just goes on and gives you another handful of settings instead of utilizing the idea that they introduced of having elements to build your own setting. It feels like an idea that was abandoned and then for some reason just kept in the book. And no web enhancement, so on to September 2005 and D20 Cyberspace, which, oddly enough, is another one tied to D20 Future. A 96-page paperback containing 3 new advanced classes, as well as the Cyber Rave campaign setting, which of course contains the Cyber Raver advanced class, as well as 4 new starting occupations and 1 new feat. Then 7 additional cybernetic feats, expanded cybernetics rules with 80 cybernetic enhancements and 2 non-cybernetic prosthetics, 3 pieces of cybernetic equipment and 8 cybernetic item enhancements, 3 kinds of magical cybernetics, each with varying levels of associated content, plus rules for nanotechnology and wetware enhancements, also with varying levels of associated content, and slightly expanded VR rules from the VRNet web enhancement, including the rules for avatar creation and combat, as well as the exact same programs and the exact same Cybernaut advanced class. And this one is a book that mostly stays on course, but does make you question if we really needed 5 types of alternate cybernetics. Like, why can't it just be regular cyberpunk without having to add rules for stuff like implanting a chunk of vampire brain into your skull? But now on to February 2006 and D20 Future Tech, which you probably guessed already is another D20 Future product. A 96-page paperback with 79 universal equipment gadgets, which is the term they use for equipment modifications, but I've just been calling them modifications up until now because calling them gadgets doesn't really make much sense and would be more confusing than just calling them modifications. And they are universal, as in they can be applied to equipment from any progress level, which is the general level of technological advancement of a society, and also how D20 Future breaks up its future eras. And then, of course, there is a large collection of gear and gadgets which are separated by progress levels 6 through 9. We are in 5 right now, in case you were wondering. Then 20 equipment packages, which are sets of equipment for the 19 core occupations, and scientist, which at this point I cannot remember if was actually added as a new starting occupation or not. New starship creation and combat rules with 42 new starship parts, plus 10 starships, 4 space stations, and 13 starship templates. A section on systems, which is basically just miscellaneous technology of the future, communications, healthcare, etc. Expanded rules for mecha combat, as well as transforming and combining mechs, plus 8 new base mechs, 57 new mecha parts, and 5 new sample mechs. And finally, expanded rules for robots, with 11 robot feats, 10 new robot parts, and 7 sample robots. So now on to May 2006 and D20 Critical Locations, a 64-page paperback which is literally just 29 pre-constructed locations that you can use in your game. Do you need a grocery store or a roadside motel? Well, they're in this book. Okay, they do also provide adventure seats for each location and little things like weapon stats for a bowling ball and pin and other little miscellaneous rules, but mostly just locations. And at this point, you might be wondering, whatever happened to those 200- and 300-page hardcover books, and also the web enhancements, because we haven't seen either of those since 2004's D20 Future. And I think it is just kind of Wizards of the Coast moving their focus away from D20 Modern. And in a wider scale, remember, this is mid-2006, a bit more than a year away from Wizards of the Coast dropping support for 3rd edition entirely. Also, worth noting, this is the first D20 Modern supplement since D20 Weapons Locker. However, oddly enough, this book does have the very last D20 Modern web enhancement, a 3-page PDF which provides an aquarium. And I do not know why, but for some reason the fact that the last web enhancement is just a 3-page document with an aquarium amuses me. Also, there was one more hardcover, September 2006, D20 Dark Matter. And this is a 160-page hardcover campaign setting that was originally a campaign setting for Alternity, which makes a lot of sense because it seems like a lot of content for D20 Modern was picked from Alternity's corpse. Anyway, the majority of the book is taken up with an in-depth supernatural conspiracy campaign setting. I would say it is the most thorough and in-depth amount of lore in any D20 Modern book. But also contains 3 new playable species. There are also 2 new advanced classes and 3 prestige classes, 3 starting occupations, 20 new feats, new kinds of ammunition, grenades, monster hunting kits, and exotic drugs, 26 new spells, 25 new psionic powers, remember those, 46 magic items, and one adventure. And that was the last ever D20 Modern book. But it almost wasn't. That's right, cancelled product, D20 Spectaculars, a superhero supplement for D20 Modern, which reportedly was to be a 160-page hardcover. And sorry about the quality of the image, it is the only one available, and thanks to TSR Archive for making me aware of this thing and having this image, and also a little bit of information on it, and according to them, it was previewed in the 2006 May to August catalog and was actually supposed to come out before Dark Matter before being abruptly cancelled. And I was able to find a little more info from, of all places, the Drive-Thru RPG page for D20 Dark Matter, which states that despite a strong start for 2006, relative to other years, Wizards of the Coast started pulling designers off of D20 Modern titles for bigger and, in their eyes, more important projects, like Star Wars Saga Edition. And it does also suggest that D20 Modern was not really living up to the Wizards' expectation, who allegedly thought that D20 Modern was just going to dominate every part of the market that wasn't already dominated by another Wizards of the Coast product, and become, quote, the gaming system of the entire industry. Like I accused them of in my original video. And then it just didn't perform up to those ridiculous expectations, or to the level of other Wizards of the Coast products. Presumably they were just drunk on Dungeons & Dragons power and didn't consider that their success with that product line was largely due to the fact that Dungeons & Dragons had an almost 30-year history and was so well known, even outside the gaming community, that it was and still is basically synonymous with tabletop role-playing game. And I will say I am more than a little disappointed about this one. Not that I think it would have been particularly good, I'm just really interested in seeing how different designers approach the unique challenges of adapting superheroes into a role-playing game. And we are not done yet, because there was more than just web enhancements on that D20 Modern website. There were also adventures. Now, I did not put these in the main timeline because there are 28 of them, and honestly, I didn't want to stop and summarize 28 adventures, so I'm just kind of treating them as a single product that was slowly released over like 3 years. And much like the other content, started out very strong but then slowly dried up. The adventures are short, ranging from 6 to 18 pages but averaging around 10, and there is also quite a lot of variety, as this product line was very non-focused, but some are connected either loosely or as an ongoing campaign, and rumor has it that there was another 8-adventure campaign planned, but, well, the thing I just mentioned previously. And while most of these are just generically D20 Modern, some are specifically branded for Urban Arcana, as well as one each for D20 Past and Future. And I am not going to get into the specifics of any of these adventures. You can download them from the archived website linked below if you would like to check them out for yourself. And that was my product history, post-mortem, whatever I'm calling these things, on D20 Modern. A series that just kind of seemed to be trying to do everything. And it kind of seems like the strategy here was to throw in as many things as possible, as many player options as they could, as many different settings as they could, just a volume of things with the hope that some of those things will be close enough to what the players want that they will be satisfied with it, instead of just making a thing that has its own appeal. And yes, D20 Modern had, and still has, its fans. When I was looking for information on D20 Spectaculars, I found forum posts from the time where people were really disappointed about it being cancelled. And I think the actual problem was they were making compatibility with other D20 system products a selling point for D20 Modern. And that is something that really only has appeal if you are already playing Dungeons & Dragons 3rd Edition or another D20 system game and want to play a different game with the same rules that happens to be provided by D20 Modern. Just for example, let's say that it is the year 2006, and I do not play Dungeons & Dragons, but I do want to play a post-apocalyptic role-playing game. And from that perspective, what does D20 Apocalypse have to offer me over, say, Mutazoids, or Deadlands, Hell on Earth, or After the Bomb? Okay, maybe not After the Bomb, but what about Darwin's World, which is another D20 system game, or Gamma World 5th Edition, which is also published by Wizards of the Coast? Or how about just something like GURPS, which is actually designed from the ground up to be a universal system? My point is, if you're not familiar with the D20 system, then the D20 branding doesn't really matter. And as I said in the other video, I don't hate D20 Modern, I don't think it's a bad game, I think it's a fine game. It just seems like there were a lot of missteps in its design and promotion. And while 2002 to 2006 may seem like a really short lifespan for a role-playing game, remember that 3rd edition only lasted from 2000 to 2007, and 4th edition actually lasted only 4 months more than D20 Modern. And if you're doing the math, yes, this does mean that we've officially passed the point where 5th edition is the longest running version of Dungeons & Dragons from Wizards of the Coast. Although there is that 50th anniversary coming up, and I'm sure they are just itching to sell everyone a new set of core rulebooks. And that is all I really have to say on the topic of D20 Modern. Although I guess I probably should mention Everyday Heroes, which is a spiritual successor to D20 Modern based on the 5th edition rules. That is a thing coming out soon, and there are some interesting things there. The one that's caught my attention most is they're putting out a series of licensed movie campaign books on films such as Escape from New York, and, you know, other movies that are less culturally significant than Escape from New York. So I will put a link to that in the description if you'd like to check that out for something that is a bit more D20 modern and less D20 years ago. And thank you for watching, with extra special thanks to my Fight and Flail Snails, Samuel Gorski and Randy Mulholland. If you'd like to be cool like them, you can check out my Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and fun stuff that I make for the Patreon. You can also give me money on Ko-fi if you want. You don't have to, but you can. Links to those things in the description, but if you don't want to do that, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos that either myself or YouTube have lovingly selected for you, and I'm sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.